Welcome to What Ha Happened, the podcast where we talk about our latest chismes,
or gossip for you non-Spanish speaking folks,
crazy travel stories, hood memoirs, and food and wine.
This is an adult podcast,
so some of our topics may make our listeners a wee bit uncomfortable.
Listener discretion is advised.
Hi listeners, this is part 2 of yesterday's episode, so sit back, grab a glass of wine or a beverage of your choice, and enjoy the show.
Well, the thing is that me being the subject and having someone interpret me as I have never interpreted myself. I refer to, example, Armando Duron as a curator. I refer to Armando openly and many times as my vision therapist. Because he's able to interpret my images in a manner that I perhaps am thinking subconsciously, unconsciously, consciously, but have never verbalized. Armando Duron has verbalized through the written word and through his selection and placement of my work. So as a curator, I'm interested in how he perceives the work. I do not want to impose myself upon his interpretation of my work. Who am I? You have a view of my work as I had never seen my work before interpreted. I find that fascinating. The same respect I give to Alessandro and to Heather in terms of the work that they do with my work. With Melissa, it's a different story. Her and I will go head to head on a number of things. But eventually, Melissa and I will come to an agreement, and I will say, I'll wake up in the middle and I say, damn, she was right.
I was just going to say that. Of course Melissa's right.
Not always. Not always.
Most of the time.
Okay, Melissa, let me tell you. Because
I don't know who Melissa is.
now there are times when Melissa and I are like an old married couple, we'll agree and we'll disagree and we'll just be ornery to each other just to be ornery, no más para picar, So that's part of the give and take. But again, in regards to the interpretation of me as a subject, I find that so endearing.
Dude.
I am really?
Yes.
Really?
Seriously.
It's like me traes flores y chocolates.
Claro, ¿qué más quieres?
Besos y cachetadas.
Ay, cachetadas.
Besos y cachetadas is the title of a whole other thing I'm working on. But it's interesting to see, again, the storyteller in us that wants to tell a story and then struggles to find the through line.
Yes.
And you have to find the through line. Go ahead.
Have to.
Go ahead.
That's the art of what we do.
Yeah.
That is the art. That is the torture.
Explain to me what that
being
fucking
tumultuous.
means.
I feel like that's like our debates, right? Our debates is like, what is the through line of that? Why?
Can you guys explain to me what that means?
Like, why is
I
that
don't
so
know what that
special?
means.
So a through line is pretty much it's kind of the A story that holds the film together, right? So what is that A story that holds the film together? And there was always a kind of, in documentaries, it's tough because the documentaries, some of them are scripted and some of them are unscripted. Mm-hmm. In this case, it was unscripted, but we were able to kind of construct a script out of his interview. So we conducted Luis Garza's interview at Dave Target's old home, which is a Chenard School of Arts, which became later CalArts.
Oh.
Right. So it was a very historical, monumental building. There's so much history there. And just to be able to sit there and have a conversation with Luis about his life was very powerful in itself. I'm not sure where we're going with this. I got interrupted a couple times. So, and so finding the through line. Finding the through line. I got interrupted so many times.
But that's what we do to our subjects. You know what? Can you say that again and repeat the question? How does it feel? How does it feel, director?
How does it feel to be on the other side?
But the through line to
Hey,
Luis's.
what were you talking about exactly? A ver, let's bring it. Let's reel it all in.
No, but pretty much the through line to Luis's life in the story is that we're trying to find a home for his work, right? And so we discovered that, and that was the reason why the title, right? Razón de ser. Why the name Razón de ser?
Because the question was asked of me, much like what this conversation started with. How did you get into photography? What got you into photography? I found myself through photography. Photography gave me a base. It gave me a grounding. It gave me a sense of self. It gave me a sense of community. It introduced me to the Mexican community, the Chicano community that it was evolving out of the 60s and 70s, the whole civil rights struggle. I come from a Mexican family that migrated to New York City in the 1920s. I was born in the South Bronx, in Italian, Irish, Jewish, Puerto Rican, black neighborhoods. It was balkanization. It was a whole other sensibility, chameleon, as you referred to earlier, to survive, to exist as a Mexicano, was a very unique experience, very challenging one. Inside the house it was Mexicano, outside it was everything else.
Yes, I could imagine. I cannot imagine.
Well, so when I first come out to Los Angeles, I never seen so many Mexicans in my life.
I know. That's like when I went to New York, I was like, "There's no Mexicans here." What
Yeah,
the fuck?
exactly.
I knew one Mexican family, and that was Norma and Letty, and those are my best friends, and they were Mexicanos. They lived downstairs. I can bang and they can hear me, right?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, they're like, you need to try tacos or whatever. I said, tacos? I did not know what that, but I love tacos now. But I still to this day know, and they were the only Mexican family I knew in New York.
Bro, okay. So that's what I'm saying. When we were talking, and so before we started to record, we were having this conversation because I was explaining to him my experience as a illegal immigrant of Mexico coming to the United States, but I'm coming into California. And he's having, his first generation in New York. It's a totally different fucking, and exactly, Heather, what you were saying is a completely different experience for the both of us, and it's just like, wow.
Well, you touch upon something I think each of us here at this table has experienced. Alessandro being Argentino-Mexicano in L.A.
Peruvian, Mexican.
Peruvian Mexican.
Peruvian Chicano.
And
Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican,
Mexican.
Okay, and so each of us brings a certain aspect of a multiculturalism of this continent to L.A., which becomes a meeting place, a confluence in the bend of the river of personalities, of cultures and histories and experiences, some common, some uncommon. Pero there's a sense of what I get from this conversation with each of us, a familia. Being at the kitchen table, we each has expressed a certain sensibility of who we are with a brand of who we are. Soy borinqueña, soy New Yorican, soy Mexican, soy mexicana, chicana, soy chicano, mexicano, soy peruano, mexicano. Soy
un enigma.
Un enigma. Okay. All right.
Mexicano.
Eso sí es una mezcla.
Exactly. And that's what it is. Es una mezcla. That's why sometimes when you look at this branding process by the census, as you were referring to before, in terms of checking off a box, it's such bullshit.
Yes.
It's a caste system.
Woof.
It's a caste system that tries to force you into a segmented portion of what a bureaucracy is trying to interpret you to be.
Yes. Oh my God.
That you do not fit into. I fall outside the parameters and I refuse to be part of that box.
¿Y qué tal todos los negros que son latinos y son negros? And what box you
know
fall
how
into?
I came to be a Chicano?
Where you fall into? Oof.
I came to be a Chicano when I came out of New York and I came to LA, and it was 1965. I came out here 2 weeks before the Watts Rebellion. That was my first introduction to LA. I go back and forth to New York for a while. I come back out to LA. I'm picking up odd jobs. I'm going to school. I hadn't picked up a camera. I just began to pick up a camera. I do a short little stint with a commercial photographer who teaches me the basics of studio lighting, studio photography, studio darkroom work, and all of that. So I begin to learn the basics. It was a short little period. Business folds. I'm out of work. I'm doing odd jobs as a movie extra. I'm riding horses, riding motorcycles, doing whatever I can. And I'm broke. I don't know who to go to. And una amiga that I had met and her husband was a social worker says, look, we're going to introduce you to a guy by the name of Ed Bonilla. Ed Bonilla is an East Side organizer working with an organization called NAP, Neighborhood Adult Participation Project, which was part of the big society of Lyndon Baines Johnson. It was, crumbs off the table to the black and brown community, and it was a national organization. But he ran the Chicano organization of NAP out of Lincoln Heights on 20th Street on Broadway. So I have a Pentax camera that I just recently purchased, and I was beginning to photograph with no direction. And so I go into his office, I sit down, and Ed is old school. Pelo negro, slick back, shades, goatee, bigote. He looks at me and goes, you need a job? Yeah, I need a job. Okay. You're from New York? I go, yeah, I'm from New York. You're Puerto Rican? I go, no, I'm not Puerto Rican. I'm Mexican. I go, no, yeah, I am Puerto Rican. By osmosis. I'm Irish. I'm Jewish. I'm Italian. I start taking an attitude. A typical New Yorker. I'm about to say fuck you, and I'm
Yeah.
but I say, pero cálmate, Louis. I mean, this is your first interview.
Right.
You need some money.
So he continues to stroke his beard and sit behind his desk and say, you're Mexican? I go, yeah. From New York? I go, yeah. And he's trying to process a Mexican
from New York. Yeah, that does not make sense.
Doesn't make sense, exactly.
Exactly.
So he looks at me and goes, you take pictures? I go, yeah, I take pictures. A Mexican from New York. A Chicano from New York. Now, I never heard the word Chicano. And so I think to myself, quickly, Mexican, Chicano. Okay, yeah. I said, yeah, I'm a Chicano from New York. He goes, pues órale, you got the job, ese. I go, all right, fantastic, man. What's the job?
That should be your title, Chicano from New York.
So he says, I say, what's the job? He says, you you're going to organize the people. Well, how do you do that? He says, pues you bring your camera tomorrow morning and you're going to start. So I show up tomorrow morning and he parachutes me into the Chicano movement. I'm in the middle of the Chicano movement. The Chicano movement is just beginning to blow out. The school walkouts are beginning to happen. You become Chicano through the process. No lo hace que estás nacido en México. You come in here and you become Chicano. No. So you reclaim your sense of Mexicanness when you didn't have a sense of Mexican because the Mexican...
Because I am Mexican.
No, but the Mexican was being beat out of you by a system that exists here in this country.
Oh, yes.
You have to understand that.
Yes.
So that's what the rebellion becomes. It becomes like a Palestinian intifada.
Oh, my God, yes.
And so it becomes a youth-led movement to begin with, and then everybody jumps in. But you have the old school of the union organizers, the community organizers from the previous generations of the 30s and 40s, who then...
Oh my God, they just need to fucking die.
So you have... again, you
so
have...
So that we don't have this fucking...
Pero, mira, this is what this history is, and that's what I come into. So as a photographer, I have suddenly found razón de ser. Wow. I find purpose. I find meaning.
Oh God.
That's what...
Yes. It comes like completely back
well, that's
to
what
you.
Nuestro compañero Alessandro and Heather find in this conversation. And what they begin to realize about me that I know about myself, but have never really openly spoken about. So for me, it becomes a spoken word now about talking about myself in a manner that I have never really spoken to other people about because no one's ever asked me.
Bruh.
But break out the wine, break out the tequila, and there's no stopping.
And just to add to that, you know, Razón de Ser, Luis C.
No, neta. That is the perfect name, Razón de Ser, neta. Like.
So Razón de Ser, the Luis C. Garza documentary will be screening at Downtown Los Angeles Film Festival November 4th at 5 o'clock in the Latin program. And it's a project that was produced by Radium 88 Productions and Cause Connect. And we'll be screening live at LA Live at the Regal. Mm-hmm. So we're really excited about that and super thrilled to be able to start showing your story, right? Start educating people in history, showing people just the will and the heart to be a creator in life, and how you just kind of you set your foot down. You're like, this is there's no other way. Like Heather was saying, there's no other way. You just the through line's really pretty much there. It's like, this is what I do, and this is what I'm going to do, and you know.
Well, the wonderful thing about this is that it is a shared story amongst my colleagues. There are any number of us who fall into the same category as I do in terms of achieving recognition for a body of work that they've done over the decades that we're beginning to receive. Some are beginning to receive. It's a wonderful thing to look around and see the amount of recognition that is developing. When you see the artists within the various fields of the arts from our community, me da un gusto, me da un placer to know that I was part of the tip of the spear 50, 60 years ago. And that it's a shared experience for those who went before me, who inspired me to carry on and to be able to pass the baton and the energy for those who will follow. That to me is the greatest gift that we have in terms of developing. And we're doing it. That's the whole thing about it. We're doing it. And in doing it, we affirm ourselves, we give voice, especially in these times that we're living in, politically and culturally and within this boundaries of the United States, that there are those who we have to be ever vigilant against, because there are those who would deny us what we are doing. So you're constantly trying to overcome those barriers. And the creation of your company, Radium 88, is a testimony to overcoming those obstacles to be able to tell stories that nobody else would do.
Yes.
Well, I want to touch on something that is also kind of like, we're not just like, it's interesting how the film is introducing us to Luis. Mm-hmm. But Luis's photos is also introducing us to another world and other people, and actually expressing other voices that we have yet to hear, and you will hear when you see his images. You get to understand that history and understand what history is, because if we don't really study it, we're going to lose it. It's just like culturally, we got to teach each other, and that's part of our culture. The images and stories that are left for us so that we can learn are things that we got to push forward and share with everybody. And I believe that's what film is. It's like communications and images, and it's just like you want to share it. I mean, that's why I love communicate. Like, to me, it's a language. And to kind of like, if you see the community and our struggle, and if you see it in images, you don't need sound or anything. You can see it in images. You can see the voices and the emotions without words, and to me that means so much, and I'm very grateful for all of that, really.
Well, within that context, photographic work, like the painter's work, from our communities, is one of an emergence that has taken hundreds of years, thousands of years. The current generation, the past generations have contributed, each one layer upon layer, a brushstroke upon brushstroke, and the colors emerge. Photographically, in particular, is from a point of view of a Gabriel Figueroa, Lola Alvarez Bravo, a Graciela Turbidi, an Oscar Castillo, a Judy Baca, Carlos Almaraz, or a Richard Duardo, names that hardly anybody else has ever heard of, that are now coming to the fore. To go to the Cheech Marin Museum in Riverside is an explosion.
Yes.
An explosion of artwork, and proof to the larger community who comes in mass to support and give credence to his collection and to others who are collecting. It's a renaissance. It's a renaissance of people awakening to the beautiful, wonderful expressions from within our communities, be they on the East Coast, the West Coast, the Midwest, wherever. But that they see an expression that gathered in a manner that they've not been able to go to before, because the institutions did not exist for them to see within that kind of a setting. It's a self-affirmation. You're not asking for permission. Aquí estoy, no me voy. We're doing it. Punto. And so when you pick up that mantle, you pick up that flag, adelante, RAZA, and you move ahead that way. And that's what we're doing. Plain and simple. It's once again, it's just giving recognition to the works that are out there from people who have never been recognized before, but who have done the work.
Oh now, my God, yes, 100%.
If people react to 66 images, I got 15,000 more. I've got over the years, over the decades, I've had any number of institutions, television companies, production companies that have come to me that are tapping into my archives because they're realizing I am a resource. I am realizing myself that I am a resource, and that the photographic body of work that I have and the images that I've captured are of historical value,
Yes, Queen.
where I never considered that before because it was so dry. Nobody cared. Nobody knew.
Mm-hmm.
¿Y tú quién eres? You know, that phrase, and who are you?
Yeah.
Who are you? Pues, I am who I am, said Popeye the Sailor Man. You know.
Yeah.
So now, through this film, this project, and through exhibitions, and through other podcasts and introductions of people beginning to connect the image to the author,
Yes.
which is important.
Yes.
Connect the image to the author
Yes.
Hallelujah.
and give credit to the author
Yes.
for the image.
Yes.
Credit.
The sensibility is that I come from a group of photographers, generation of photographers and painters, and not realizing, or somewhat realizing, that I was part of something larger that was taking place, but had never been defined, had never been refined, had never been organized. You have to have that oversight. The academicians who come in, which is usually a generation later from the original generation who begins the work, and then the next generation and following generations begin to do the study,
Refine.
begin to refine and define, as is happening now. So, as I said before, not sarcastically, but it's only taken 50 years that people are, from the academic intelligentsia world, beginning to write about that generation that has impacted in a profound way. What is the backlash to the 60s and 70s that we are experiencing currently? That cultural wars that people are speaking about today. The book banning, the phrases, the education, all of these various
Toxic
aspects.
in
You know,
the
being
environment.
woke is opposed to being asleep. You know, it's ludicrous, but it's no different than what we have undergone before. So I look at my work and I say, wait a minute, I start with La RAZA magazine. It counts a newspaper magazine as part of a much larger civil rights movement of counterculture, who's offering another point of view that would never have been expressed. That continues to this day. I think the work that Alessandro and Heather are doing are, in many ways, counterculture, but pro-culture. It's not always in resistance to. On the contrary, it is in support of. I'm not so much
Yes.
being the oppressed who's complaining about being oppressed. I'm looking at it as a way of fighting the oppression that exists.
Yes.
And just to add to that, there's so many stories in Los Angeles. Everyone has a story.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing, like, Heather and I have, always discussed is like, there's so many stories, and everyone has a story.
Yeah.
Everyone.
But what's great is that, we pick and choose who we want to tell.
We have to.
There's so many. It's like
It's
overwhelming.
It's not really overwhelming. The thought of it's overwhelming, but we go by who we feel it. It's really a connection. It's an absolute connection. We can see the vision. Like, I know that we can see the vision. Even, it's amazing on how we work together. Because he can see it and feel it. It's bizarre, right? And like, we're both thinking, yes.
Yeah. Like
It's intuitive.
answering questions.
And yeah, like it's this thing where we know. right?
It's like a synergy thing.
It's a synergy thing, and it's very rare because we know the work that it takes to do that. But what's cool is we can feel it.
And bringing this back to you, it's like that was just like such a wonderful experience, you know. And I know it's not ending here. This is just the beginning.
It's just the beginning.
You know what I'm saying?
Louise.
This thing needs to be, we're fleshing this out into a feature film, but it's
when
like
they brought this to us, when I viewed your photography, I was like, wow, how are you able to capture the essence of a person? Where to me, I think when I do landscapes, the landscape is always going to be the landscape, but to capture the essence of a person is more hard. It's harder, you know.
Those are different approaches to the subject. I look at landscapes as what time of day, where's the sun, where's the moon, what's the season, what's the emotion that the landscape is giving you. That to me is very emotional. So in that sense, it is capturing that emotion of that person. What is the landscape of that feature? What is...
I never thought to apply that to a person.
Well, of course. I look at you and I see a range of emotions. I see you in your embroidered dress and your being. I see your essence. I see your voice, the way you speak. I say, how do you capture that? How do you capture that essence of that person and translate that into a photographic two-dimensional image that brings that depth of you within a photograph? Now, sometimes you can capture that, as you well know, as a photographer, sometimes within one shot, because oftentimes many of my photographs are just one shot. I didn't have time to go in and take a whole roll. I didn't have time to intellectualize. I didn't have time to set it up. I had to quickly capture that image. As you know, it's on the fly. It's on the run. But that is an instantaneous connection. Now, what does it take to do that? Well, you have that capacity. Just listening to you, you have that capacity. Heather has the capacity. Certainly Alessandro does, and certainly as nuestro amigo does. You have that capacity. The question is what is the format that you're using to convey that? A camera is just a technical tool. Unless you as a photographer, you're giving emotion to a technical piece of ironware. You're the one who conveys the emotion. It's not the camera. You're the one who's conveying the emotion through an electronic, a metal film piece of work. But if you understand that which is in your hand, then you understand how it's like a guitar. It's like a violin. It is an instrument of refinement that you can play and create a tune, a lyric, a sensibility. The camera is no different. But you are the conveyor of that emotion. How do you capture that? Ooh.
That's a whole nother thing. That's other cuento. But the beauty of photography is that, like, you know, you're embalming time.
Yes.
Right. So you're kind of like you're encapsulating a moment that will never be recreated. It's just one single image. And you know, having studied in film school, like, you know, the realists like Andre Bazin and some of these film theorists, is that, you know, what you see and what you capture is like you're freezing time in photography, and I think that's always been a beautiful thing, even with filmmaking too. And I think filmmaking is so powerful because it encapsulates all the art forms, right? It's like photography, it's painting, it's music, it's theater, and that's what makes it such a powerful art, just medium, for us to create, tell stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know.
I want to just like kind of touch on like having I'm just thinking about like how we get our workout. We have Radium 88. We have you guys are doing like Latin theme, kind of like you're pushing the whole Latin culture through, and that's what you guys are focusing on, which is great because not a lot of companies are doing that, and for that reason, we have the Luis Garza documentary Razón, and for that reason, we can push that kind of information and stories out. Like, I'm just saying I'm grateful because you're actually exposing other people, and you get to touch other folks, and people get to know and things like that. But I'm like, yeah, we got to have more folks like Radium 88 to kind of recognize our heroes, because we have heroes. There are heroes in our communities, and I'm just saying in the Latino community, Chicano community. I mean, we have a lot of heroes, but if we don't hear their stories, and if we don't keep telling their stories, we're gonna forget about them. So we have to, like, as filmmakers and as creators, as other artists, we have to share that with the world. I mean, if you're, us as filmmakers, that's what we do. We share those stories with the world. So I hope that there are other production companies that, because obviously you guys are one production company, and we can't take on like everybody.
Yeah.
I wish we could, right? If you could, you'd have a laundry list of like artists that you wish you could tell their story to. But I'm just hoping and I'm wishing, and you guys can hear me, and hopefully the world listening. But we have a lot of heroes like Luis Garza, and we need to.
Richard Duardo, right?
Richard Duardo.
You rich for the podcast.
Well, there are a lot of artists who are heroes. A lot of people that have influence, and you don't know where the influence came from. It's impacting your life, and you don't know how or where, and it's in there. It's in your world, but it's good to know where it actually comes from.
Yes, and you've made my life so much better.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
How so?
Just your time together, sharing your story, and allowing me to assimilate in some ways, and just find myself in you, and just that's your persistence. Like persistence. When he says 50 years, come on now. Most people would be like, oh, that's it, I'm giving up. And we've all done that, right? We've all got to where, well, I don't know, maybe it's just the choice. But fuck. It's persistence. You just kept doing no money, no anything in the moment. You always seem to be at the right place at the right time.
The Chicano Forrest Gump.
But you taught me persistence and to just keep going. Keep going. Because it's for a bigger picture. It's not just about us.
Well,
right?
We're compressing time. I look at what began for me coming into a state of mind that had it not been for the camera, I would not be here speaking about it. So my gratitude goes to the fact that I picked up a camera. Innocently enough. As I said, it wasn't intentional.
How did you get the money to buy that? How did you buy your first camera?
I bought it out of a pawn shop. It was cheap,
Oh, wow. It doesn't... what's interesting is that people always say it's not about like your equipment or what you have. It's a story you have to say. It's what you have to tell. Is it interesting? Because I bet you there are probably like 1,000 other people with like better cameras or like, equipment that you thought, oh, maybe I can have that. But it's where you're at and the story you're telling.
Again, the equipment, you work with what you got. It always comes down to your vision, your eye. the camera equipment that you have, however sophisticated it may be or not be, is still a 35 millimeter film. It's a Kodak or it's an Agfa or it's whatever the film that you have. It's still looking through a lens finder. It's still looking through the viewer. It's still you looking to capture that what you see that generates an interest in you to click the shutter release. How and when and at what moment, that decisive moment, as what's his name, the French photographer, his name will come to me, says the decisive moment is arbitrary. But you develop a sensibility of what to capture, when to capture, how to capture that particular image with whatever equipment you have. I started with a 35 Pentax. I went to a Nikon, and I pretty much stayed there. I tried 2.25. It was too bulky for me. I tried range finders. I found different focusing mechanisms that were not quick enough for the kind of photography that I was doing. The photography that I was doing and capturing the images that I was capturing during the Chicano civil rights movement required speed and agility. I had to be quick in order to capture the image. I had to load and unload those film. You have 35 images or you have 25 images, and you got to be fast. You got the police on your back. You got dogs nipping at your heels. You got situations that are changing in front of you. And you have to be quick. And you have to be decisive about the image. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my photographic work you'll look at, and you'll see it's only one frame, or it's 2 frames at most. And then there are other pieces which require study, and I have the time to set it up.
Well, how does that decision get made? Like, I mean, every scenario, I guess, must have been different, but it's just like, we're not talking like a digital camera right now. You're talking, you got frame stills and you have rolls.
Well, again, this is where, for the gelatin silver print wet process, there's 2 parts. There's the part where you're photographing with film, and then there's the other part where you're in the darkroom developing. And those 2 become the marriage. That's the male and the female. The birthing process is with the chemicals and souping the images and realizing, here's my baby. I did see what I saw. I did capture what I thought I captured, but I wasn't sure. Because was it out of focus? Was it in focus? Was my film speed off?
Did that happen a lot, or like,
sure it happened.
And then it's just like, I got one image, like out of 5, I got one. I was like,
exactly. That's why within film, you shoot over, under, and on. So there's 3 frames that you go for: over, under, and on, in terms of exposure. Mm-hmm. You see? Now, if you have the luxury of being able to shoot a dozen shots because it's a still image or it allows for that kind of coverage, that's fine. But when you don't, you better know your film, you better know your camera speed, you better know your lens. All of those factors trigger in because you're on the run. And so there's a whole body of my work that reflects that. There's also work within my collection that are studies that are of personalities and figures, and studies of the human form, of architectural renderings, of a variety of things that nobody has ever seen before.
Can I ask you, did you have a favorite lens, a size lens? Or like, is it...
No, my choice was usually At that time, I carried two lenses. Two cameras.
Two lenses.
Well, two cameras.
Two cameras.
I did not have a zoom lens at that time. I carried a 50 millimeter lens and a 135 lens. So I had two Nikons, or a Pentax and a Nikon.
135 and a 50, folks.
Yeah.
You heard it here first. Guys, listen to that.
And then other times I'd have a 35 mil, which gives me
Was a wider.
a wider approach. So I had different lenses, but those were the ones that I stuck with for the most part. Because as I look at my work now, I do a lot of portrait work. You'll see that within my selection, well, the selection that was made by Armando. There's a lot of portrait work. And I come to realize that I'm drawn to the human face, the human character, the lighting, all of those things come in. But it's also a practice. You go in and you practice. You practice lighting, you practice backlighting, you practice front lighting, side lighting, you practice studio lighting. You know, these are all rehearsals. What eventually gets out to the public is an arbitrary process. That's why I don't interfere with the curatorial process as they go through my collection. I have people coming into my body of work now, searching for images for use within documentaries. The recent documentary of Siqueiros by PBS is one. Philip Rodriguez came to me for the story on Ruben Salazar and the Silver Dollar, and for Oscar Zeta Costa, the Chicano lawyer. There are a number of other PBS productions that are tapping into my photographic archives. So the body of work that I did that I never thought anybody was interested in, I'm coming to find out that people are discovering my work.
Well,
Amen.
And we're focused on you, you know. And we're focused on you. Yeah, others were focused on, you know, something you were there at the moment, but we're focused on our energies on you.
Well, that's...
Everything helps the next.
It does.
Well, see, that's the thing that I find interesting now, that the interest in my work is generating interest in other work from other people, and of a time that nobody thought about. If you didn't think about me, then, well, what the fuck were you doing in Budapest, Hungary? What were you doing in Russia? What were you doing in New York? What were you doing in all of these different locations that you photographed? So the attention comes to place and time.
Place and time.
And so a larger story emerges, because then the photograph becomes a point in time, a reference beyond the photographer who took the image. What does the image reflect? See, and that's the wonderful thing about the communications that we're in. This documentary reflects me in a variety of periods of time that was captured eloquently. From my beginnings, when I first took my photographs of 139th Street with that first image of that little rocking horse in the middle of a street on 139th, to family images, to Cesar Chavez, to David Alfaro Siqueiros, to Budapest, Hungary, and the Vietnamese, and to East LA, etc., etc., etc. So it's a time travel that editorially Alessandro has pieced together in such a short period of time that people are looking at this and saying, my God, we just went from here to there, to there, to there, to there, and I get a sense of that period of time, which is the wonderful capability of the editing process and the image process and the presentation process, with a wonderful musical score that backs it.
Yeah, Raul Pacheco.
Raul Pacheco.
Yeah.
So it all brings together that craft of storytelling. Again, I go back to storytelling. I'm just a storyteller, as we are. as we all are here. We're storytellers.
Yeah.
So we're relishing in each other's story. It really is what it is. I mean, I love hearing about Heather's family in New York as Boricuas and then coming out to L.A. because I have a similar reverse experience that she has, you know?
Right, the other way. And one day, I know that he'll be telling my story and I'm telling your story.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we never look at ourselves as like we have a story, but
Yeah, but you do, you see? And that's the wonderful thing about it. And so I would ask you, let me tell your story.
okay, yes, I say yes.
Okay.
Yes, done.
All right. Because we see each other in a way that sometimes we don't see ourselves.
Thank you for listening to us. Please tune in tomorrow for the final part of this episode. See you then. To follow us, you can go to whathahappened.com for a link to all of our social media and to read our bios.
If you would like us to read your story,
May it be funny or scary or just some hot cheese.
please email us at stories@whathahappened.com.